You can imagine the fire started that evening. By the 8th, they were evacuating hundreds and thousands of people. And within 10 days, we went from 100 households to 10,000 households, able to get housing through the Airbnb partnerships.
This is the Digital Humanitarian, where we explore how technology is transforming crisis response.
Today, we're going to talk about wildfires, and specifically, we're going to talk about wildfires and housing. For that, we have two very special guests with us. We have Maribel Marin from 211 LA, who's a non-governmental organization that really is tasked with helping people, acting as a call center for people in need during disasters and generally, and they work all throughout the United States. We also have with us Christoph Gorder, who's the executive director of Airbnb.org, which acts as an amazing organization that provides housing for people in humanitarian crises. Thank you both for being with us here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, nice to be here, Dana.
Thank you. So let's kind of set the scene. Maybe we can start. We're talking about January 2025. Massive wildfires hit LA, the largest ones in decades. And it caused the evacuation of over 150,000 people and massive damage. And maybe, Maribel, you can help us kind of set the scene and start and place us at the disaster scene.
So, Los Angeles experiences some pretty heavy winds known as the Santa Ana winds. They usually are forecasted in advance, so we knew they were coming. As early as January 3rd, we knew that the winds were coming, and the 211 Los Angeles is the county's disaster information hotline, so we were already preparing in the event that there could be fires. And one of the important elements that came into play was that on January 7th, about 4:30 in the afternoon, Airbnb contacted us. By 10:30 that evening, we had an agreement and we were ready to go with 7-night stays for up to 100 families. Well, you can imagine the fire started that evening. By the 8th, they were evacuating hundreds and thousands of people. And within 10 days, we went from 100 households to 10,000 households, able to get housing through the Airbnb partnership. So we were able to put families into temporary stays for at least 7 days. And then after that, it just became one of the only solutions for many people who had lots of pets and, multiple members in the household.
And how does this differ from different disasters you responded to? Because usually we're thinking about shelter and we're thinking about evacuation centers. Right. And how does this compare?
Well, typically during disasters where people are being evacuated, the American Red Cross opens up these congregate shelters, right, which are like armories or gymnasiums where they put cots up. That really wasn't the solution for the families with multiple pets and multiple children in LA. We really needed to have different types of housing, and Airbnb was able to provide that for us. And it was really the only resource that was available during that time. And we were able to also bypass the phone queues because during disaster, you have call surges that create really long wait times. So what we were able to do is just quickly put up an online form that then was able to get people into our care coordination platform so that we could begin the process of working with Airbnb to get the families booked into places fairly quickly. I mean, within 10 days, we already had 10,000 households referred over and being booked by Airbnb.
And it's also a huge influx of people that happened all at once. I mean, it was a massive fire and the need was really, really urgent, as I recall.
Yeah, we had over 55,000 people who signed up. So there was a great need. So, it was tremendous that we had the resource available so quickly. Really, that was the key, that the partnership was able to spin up within a matter of hours. And then we were in constant communication to increase the number of stays that we could put people into.
We'll talk about this a little bit more, but Christoph, I'm super curious to hear about Airbnb, Airbnb.org, and how you see this and how you came to this whole situation.
Well, Airbnb.org is an interesting organization. We're actually an independent nonprofit here in the United States. We were founded about 5 years ago by Airbnb. specifically with the mission to house people in times of crisis and to open up the Airbnb network to people who need it. Airbnb is a platform with over 8 million listings around the world that are there. They don't need to get set up. We know exactly where they are. And generally, if there are people nearby and there's a crisis, there's going to be an Airbnb nearby. And so the idea goes, it goes back more than 10 years, a hurricane that hit New York City when Airbnb was a very new organization. Some of the hosts opened up their homes for people who were evacuated. And that idea sort of stuck around and then got formalized a few years ago. And today, Airbnb.org, in the past 5 years, has provided free stays to over 250,000 people in 134 countries. There's just such an increased need with, increased humanitarian disasters, increased climate events. And as Airbnb grows, we just have access to more and more resources to be able to help people. So we're trying to leverage all of that.
It's brilliant. Like you said, the housing are there. We know where they are. We know where everything is positioned. Everything is ready. Why not utilize it? Can you walk me through this, the kind of the technological aspect of this? How did it actually work during the LA fires?
So we're responding to disasters around the world on an ongoing basis. So far this year we've already responded to 24 events across the world, in Asia, in Europe, and in the United States. Coincidentally, wildfires are fairly common in Southern California, unfortunately, and there had been a pretty serious wildfire just a couple weeks before in the same area in Malibu in December. And so ultimately there was not a need to house people, but we had activated already. And so we're sort of familiar with the terrain and knew Maribel and 211 LA. Because the way that we work is we partner up with a local organization who's embedded in the community. So 211 LA is an institution in LA that's been around for decades. They're deeply connected with all of the fabric of social services across the county, across the city of LA, and people know them and trust them. What we do is we plug into the existing system so that they will be able to, the nonprofit partners that we work with on the ground, are able to provide a whole range of other services to the people that we're trying to help. Because, of course, housing is just one issue. They need to file for FEMA benefits. They need to rematriculate their children in a new school because they need unemployment benefits. They have special needs. They lost their medical equipment. All of these things, all this range of different services are then served by an organization like 211 LA. They identify the families in need, refer them to us, and basically we're just transferring cash, transferring credit into their Airbnb account, and then they book whatever Airbnb they want. So if they need a place near their job, if they need a place that's wheelchair accessible, it opens up all of the Airbnbs to them, which gives them enormous agency and kind of control in a moment when they've lost complete control of their lives. They get to choose and they get to move into the place that's going to serve their specific needs. And that's the beauty of the Airbnb's network, is that there are tens of thousands of options, and there's the one out there that's going to fit your particular family's needs in this particular moment.
Wow, and you're really transferring, like you said, the agency to the people. It's not like here's the house, here's the shelter, but rather here's money, and please choose from the network of housing that we have what would accommodate you.
So when we look at the data, for example, of where did people go and stay, there were two big fires. There's the Palisades fire, which is a little bit further west, and the Eaton fire, which is a little bit further east.
Right.
When you look at their points of origin and where they ended up staying, they stayed in their neighborhoods because they want to be near their jobs. They want to be near their homes. They want to be, their kids, their school is still standing. And so if they went with the other options, which were to go to a Red Cross congregate shelter, they would have been far away from where they needed to be. Or if they went to a hotel, there actually weren't enough hotels to accommodate all these people. So they would have still been far away. So when you look at the placement of Airbnbs and you see like what the options are, it really is a great resource for people.
And for 211, it was really ideal because once we had them booked into an Airbnb, we also had their attention, and we were able to support them initially in the first days, getting them over to the disaster assistance centers. So there was all kinds of support services at the disaster assistance centers. And because we knew where they were and we had a connection, we were able to provide transportation. We were able to support them with other things, because in those initial days, it's really traumatizing. There's a lot of information coming at you, and The last thing you want to worry about is a roof over your head for yourself and your children. The fact that we had the Airbnb partnership really allowed us to be flexible because they were very responsive to the needs. We had families that needed extended stays. We needed families who needed to be moved around sometimes as they were, getting their bearings again. So the relationship was a two-way street. We were working hand in hand every single day. Our teams were in communication constantly as we were trying to accommodate different size families or, families with pets. And some families had large animals and those needed facilities as well. So there was a lot of coordinating amongst the teams. And it was just really so important that the housing was available to them so that they could then focus on other things that were equally important.
That's amazing. And it's amazing that you provide them with like a holistic surrounding of needs. So yes, they have the housing and they have the agency around that, but they also have everything else, their rights or places they can go to or different services. And together, I think that the power of this collaboration kind of provides, the full picture.
Right. And, one of the things that Christoph mentioned was the FEMA applications, right? So part of the process is to apply for FEMA support so that they can get financial assistance, sometimes even for up to, 12 to 18 months of rental assistance. And what we were seeing initially was, people didn't understand that process. They were getting denied because they needed all kinds of documents. And again, because they had a stable place to stay, they were able then to work with us. Just the fact that there was housing was a game changer for this disaster.
It sounds like, they're privileged, it's LA, it's United States. But, Christoph, like you're saying, you're doing that all over the world. It's not just in developed countries. It's really wherever there's a need, you guys are pretty much there.
The perception is that these are wealthy neighborhoods, and there is a lot of wealth in that area, but there are many regular working class people, multi-generational families living together. I remember an instance where the eligibility criteria to get a free week stay, which was what we were offering initially during the evacuation. So during the evacuation, we said, you have to prove that you are from a mandatory evacuation area and you have to request assistance. Other than that, it's really easy. So if you just say you need help and you're from there, we're going to help you and we're not going to bog things down in a lot of bureaucracy. And I remember a case of somebody who provided their home address, and the address was like a huge mansion, like a $10 million mansion. Of course, it wasn't the owner of the mansion, it was the domestic help. And all of these people lost everything also, right? And so even though they lived in a fancy address, this is somebody who was a gardener or a maid or somebody working in the house. And so I think what we learned was, of course, over 200,000 people evacuated, and the vast majority of those found solutions for themselves. They had the resources, they had the families and whatnot. But for the 10,000 families who needed our help, we were there and we were able to move very, very quickly. So we don't need to help everybody, but with every community, there's going to be vulnerable people, and we need to identify those. And working with an organization that is really deeply embedded in the community and trusted by the community is a way you're going to find those people the most efficiently and the most quickly.
And in the Eaton fire area, there are lots of renters as well that were impacted. And
right.
So, 211 continues to help about 4,000 households from both fire areas. And we continue to put them into extended Airbnb stays. So, for example, we had a family where the grandparent, we had to put her in an assisted living situation, but they don't allow anybody to stay with her. And so her daughter was living in her car nearby. And so I think that, having the Airbnb still available, we were able to take her daughter and put her in a nearby Airbnb. That has never been possible in the past. So we're still in partnership and we're still utilizing that resource as we move through these families because we are still finding people living in their cars.
Wow. So using this, this technology and this collaboration, basically you're saying it's not just a quick fix. It's not something that we can do super immediately, which is great, but it's also in terms of sustainability and long-term kind of commitment of both organizations. That's where the people really gain a lot of the benefit.
For all of us who've worked in disaster response, you realize what a long road to recovery it is, right?
Right.
It's a 5 to 10 year road to recovery for these communities. And the news, the news has moved on and a lot of people have moved on and the donors have moved on. But if you're in the community, they're still really, really hurting today and have enormous, enormous needs. And so being in this line of work, you really understand, you've got to be in it for the long haul. Our specialty at Airbnb Airbnb.org is, I think what we're really good at is moving very, very fast. I sort of see us as kind of the ambulance that gets you to the hospital. We can move very quickly. We don't need to set anything up. We can flip a switch. The technology allows you to book your place immediately. And so you don't need to set up shelters, and we've got the resources to be able to put people in those places. I think over time, then other resources come into play, right? Insurance, government, other donors, family. Our big strength is really in that first month. But here we are, 4 or 5 months later with still hundreds and hundreds of people still living in free Airbnbs because they have no other option right now.
I'm super curious to hear from both of you a little bit about this, both from, let's say, humanitarian perspective and the need, but also from the technological aspect and kind of matching that.
211 LA, as Christoph said, has been around for decades. Actually, we've been around for over 40 years. And the last really huge disaster that we participated in was in the 1994 earthquake, when we were sending people physically out to communities with like printers, and it was a different day, right? Today, we have a platform that allows all our agents to work from home. They were on immediately. We were able to bring people on really quickly. Our staff is trained on how to prepare for disaster, so they were ready. When Airbnb came to us with a housing resource, we knew immediately how to set up our system so that people wouldn't be waiting on the phones forever. And I think that for us, the challenge has just really been staffing, because the need was so great, right? Even though we were able to put on these electronic forms so that people could digitally apply for help, we were slammed with calls coming in. People were trying to evacuate and there wasn't clarity on where to go immediately after the fire started. And so for us, we've been challenged with just operationally being able to be at full capacity. We regularly have dropped maybe 25% of our calls because we just don't have the staff to do it. We're a nonprofit organization. And so, unless there's a disaster that alerts the community that we need support, then we are struggling. But as Christoph said, now that the media is not paying attention to it, all the support we got during the fires is starting to kind of go away. We want to make sure that people understand that the infrastructure we bring is really supporting us just like a fire department or a police department, right? The work that we do really provides a social safety net. And it's, I think, viewed differently because we're a nonprofit as opposed to a government agency. But this partnership and this experience is really elevating an understanding of how important the nonprofit sector is to disaster response, especially in an area like Los Angeles, which is so diverse.
And especially in today's environment.
Right. Well, the diversity, the cultural diversity, the economic diversity, and just the geography of the area requires that, you really build together and knit together all of the organizations that have capacity to respond, because we couldn't have done it by ourselves, right? It really took partnership with Airbnb, with Red Cross, with the county, for us to be able to provide the support that the community needed. There were so many moving parts, so much information flooding the space that people were like, oh my God, what's real, what's not real?
Maribel's right. The operational surge is really difficult to manage. This was the first time our two organizations were working together, even though we were aware of it. And so our first time working together was this massive event. It's so difficult to sort of capture just how big of a surge, right? To have 50,000 requests for assistance. That's 50,000 households, which would be orders of magnitude more than the daily volume. And we're working together for the first time, right? So the public has not necessarily been aware of how Airbnb.org works. So there's very low understanding. 211 LA is figuring out how we work. We're figuring out how this all works. We are juggling just wild budget swings. So as Maribel said, we started with the expectation that we would help 100 households. And, within a week, we were up to 10,000. And so thinking about how do you fund all that? Because all of this is, of course, paid for. Like Airbnb is not like a hotel that just has empty hotel rooms. These are all hosts in the community who need to get paid. So Airbnb waives all the fees. The company makes no money on it, but we're still paying for people to be able to stay and choose the Airbnb that they want. And so that means millions and millions of dollars are being moved through the system and distributed directly to people, thousands of families. All of that work, of course, the technology platform exists and does an amazing job, but at the same time, there's stuff outside the platform. You get I don't know, dozens of press calls every day, and somebody has to talk to the press. You get a lot of misunderstanding on the part of the public, low digital literacy.
Interesting.
People who've never used Airbnb before. How do I use this? How do I sign up? Things that might be very intuitive for you and I, like I use Airbnb all the time. It's really easy. My parents, who are 82, have never used Airbnb, and they would have a very difficult time. Very, very difficult time. Our takeaway from this is the first lesson of disaster response is be prepared. And so we're investing very heavily in building out our relationships globally with organizations like Maribel's organization so that we are ready when the surge comes, and just improving our systems so that we've got a playbook that we can roll out. And that's made a really big difference in our ability to scale this year.
Yeah, preparedness is key. What about trust? Did any of you feel like there's issues with trust? People also saying wait, are you really housing me for free? Why Airbnb?
Yes.
What's, this and what's that? Or even you, Maribel, when you just started the partnership.
Just like Christoph said about Airbnb, most people don't need 211 on a regular basis, right?
Yeah.
211 typically answers about 400,000 calls a year, but it's for people who are very low income, or a lot of them are unhoused. So it's not a service that most people who have housing and jobs ever need. And so calling 211 for many people during the fires was the first time they ever encountered us. Right. But they got a real person when they called us, right? When they signed up for the housing support, a real person called them back. And that made a difference. And the 4,000 families that are still working with us today are working with a real care coordinator who is calling them regularly to let them know if there's, an opportunity for financial assistance that they can apply for, or if a deadline is coming up. And so I think that for folks that have never had to use 211 before, it's been really kind of a breath of fresh air for them. They feel like, okay, someone's got my back. I don't have to worry about writing all these dates down. And it's really been something that folks have embraced and are committed to working with us. We're not just solving their problems. We're helping them solve their own problems. We're empowering them.
It's really a personal connection, plus technology, but really that's in the essence of it.
Trust is really key. People are skeptical, and unfortunately in disasters, a lot of people take advantage. There's a lot of fraud. There's a lot of people scamming. Imagine you've gone through this trauma, going through one of the most difficult moments of their lives, right? And they're extremely traumatized. It's difficult for them to think straight. They've lost everything. Their kids are really stressed out. And now you've got to go through this experience. And so I think, people are just already quite fragile and brittle, and then you go into this. I mean, I think also, the trust between the two organizations as we're getting to know each other. Imagine, we just got thrown into this in a matter of hours together and didn't know each other. So, for example, on day 2, a bunch of, the word got out that Airbnb.org was going to provide free housing, and the word got to a bunch of celebrities. And all of a sudden, they want to be helpful. They're like, hey, if you need help, Airbnb and 211 LA is providing free housing. We weren't quite ready for that, right? And so Maribel's team was still training up. We were starting to do intake, but we weren't ready to do intake for when the Kardashians start saying, if you need help, go over to these guys. And so it's natural for a 211 LA to say, wait a second, I thought we were going to wait on this. And we're like, no, we didn't let the cat out of the bag here. Those moments of when you're stressed, when you're moving really fast, the transparency and trust between partners is so important, and it really gets tested, honestly, in these moments of stress. So I think keeping that open channel communication, being super empathetic to each other's needs and strains as an organization is kind of what helped us get through some really stressful times.
There was also a lot of data that needed to be collected, right? In the beginning, we thought we were just housing people. And so we were collecting the most basic level of information because nobody wants to answer 5 million questions, especially after having gone through what they went through. And so 100%. We're being asked by everybody for data, and we're just like, wait a second. We just need to get people to help, and then we'll deal with the data situation later. And so we're really happy now that we have gotten that data situation squared away. And we have a new dashboard that shows people what's happening with the 4,000 cases that we're managing, including the extended stays that we continue to provide. And hopefully that's something that we can share. I think I brought a QR code that will allow people to connect really quickly to our dashboard. But, that right now is probably the most important aspect of our work. Everybody wants to know the numbers. They want to know where the families are now, where they came from, where are they staying. So I think the data part now is the most important part so that we can understand how to better prepare, how to better understand what information is key immediately after and then ongoing, because we were building the plane as we were in the air when it comes to all of the data collection and the care coordination. The requirements for a lot of these different steps necessitated for us to continue getting more data from families. And I think that is going to be an interesting story to tell once, we're able to house people. That is our ultimate goal. We have 4,000 households that continue to need support, and we're working now to create local collaborations in order to get people into stable housing.
I see a lot of it in what we do. I mean, stage one is really just know what you need to do and do it. If we're talking about housing, house the people. If they need services, if they need supplies, just give them the things. Stage two is let's see what we actually did and what we're actually doing. What's the progress? And let's follow up. And I think that's where the power of technology and I know you guys have an in-house platform, and the power of that is so massive, being able to visualize everything. What do I need to do? Stage one, and do it. And then stage two, really, let's visualize it and understand what we are doing. Tell me about the pets, guys. You kept mentioning the pets.
In the 10,000 households that we sent to Airbnb, there were almost 10,000 pets, which was more than children.
I mean, when you're evacuating, you take your pets with you. If you look at like normal behavior of people using Airbnbs just in regular times to go on vacation, very few people take their pets, right? You might take your dog on vacation, but like your cat's staying home, your goldfish is staying home. When you're evacuating your house, you're taking your pets with you. And so it became sort of like a metric for us. Like every morning when we were checking the numbers, we were like, okay, how many families have we helped? How many people? How many children? How many pets? And the number of pets just kept going up and up. And of course, it makes sense. I just loved like the image of like this menagerie out there. Because you imagine like, it's not just dogs and cats, right? It's like lizards and snakes and fish and parakeets, and people evacuated with like they're farm animals, like there are little farms in this area. They have horses and goats and all this stuff. So it becomes quite a thing. And so when you think about the practical aspects of large displacements, it's not just as simple as like, oh, well, we'll get the family in, we'll assign you 5 cots in the gymnasium, and there you're going to sit. Like, you've got all sorts of complications. You have kids with special needs. You've got pets. You've got medical equipment who have mobility issues. For those people, a situation like this is just a lifeline, right? Because what else are they going to do? Even if you get a voucher to go to a hotel, it's really difficult. I mean, imagine you're in a hotel room and you've got 2 kids and a dog and a cat and a parakeet. I mean, you lose your mind, right? In an already stressful situation. So the real value proposition for Airbnb.org is obviously the speed, but then the location, your ability to stay close to where you want to be for your particular reasons, but then the amenities that allow you to sort of like maintain your family life, whether it's pets or laundry or a little backyard or something like that. And it really makes for a much better experience for people in a tough time.
And in LA, we were surprised also by the number of multi-generational households, and the hotels and the congregate shelters were not a good solution for these folks. And the Airbnbs really were the right solution for these multi-generational families. And there were not just, grandma and kids, but they were like entire family groups that were living together.
So tell me, what's next? And I've heard a little bit from both of you before, but both of you I know are expanding what you're doing individually, but also as work together. I'd love to hear about that.
Well, 211 LA serves the county of Los Angeles, and we do have some areas where we support the state of California, but for the most part, there are 211s throughout the country that operate independently. And the conversations we're having now with Airbnb is how do we connect all the other 211s to potentially this partnership as a solution for them. Airbnb has taken the lead on convening other 211s to have that conversation, and we certainly have been sharing our experience and certainly promoting and encouraging other 211s to engage in conversations so that they can also be prepared when disaster strikes their community.
From our perspective, we can build the future of emergency housing at a global level. Currently, there is not a great solution out there for housing people in moments of crisis. And I think in the same way that Airbnb created a new category for leisure travel that didn't exist 20 years ago, and now is a great option for you if you're going on vacation, I'm looking to create that for the humanitarian space. And so we've talked a lot about these very big disasters, but I see disasters as sort of like a stack going from very big ones like LA down to the individual house fire or gas leak, where one family or two families are evacuated and they need help. And so I think there's enormous potential out there for us to activate this. We've got the platform. Airbnb covers all of our operating expenses. And so any donations that come into us go directly to paying for a family in need. So I think to the extent that we can go beyond just a corporate way of showing up and being a good neighbor and become really a leading nonprofit in this space, I think we can do an enormous amount of good. There's no lack of need. The need is only going to grow with all of these climate disasters.
Unfortunately, yes. Yes. Super, super interesting, both of you. I'm kind of hearing three main things that really came out. First of all, the need for collaboration. You know, the tech sector is great, the nonprofit sector is great, but when you put them together, especially in the context of a humanitarian crisis, it quadruples the impact and what you can do. Speed, I think, is something you both kind of kept mentioning, you know, the agility, the speed, the ability to work really quickly, to act now, to act fast, to bring the most efficient solutions. I think that's something that really stands out, and it's kind of interesting to hear that. And then finally, it's the personal connection or the personal touch on all levels for both of you with the people you're serving, but also for you together and for both of you with your communities and the organizations. It's so important. So thank you very, very, very much for sharing all this information with us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you.
Thank you, and please continue with the magnificent work, both of you.
Disasters are often unpredictable, but response efforts don't have to be. If you're a part of an aid organization, having the right digital tools can mean the difference between chaos and coordinated action. If you need practical tools for your organization's disaster management, visit mondayert.org. And if you enjoyed this, please share it with one colleague or friend who'd find it useful.